Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz. You see Jim Valliant over here in his customary seat, ready to rock and roll. And we're going to do something a little fun today. Jim, who is not a Trump supporter, let me make that clear because you may be confused about that in a little while. So, what we're going to do here is Jim is going to try to steelman for us the argument for voting for Trump, not for supporting Trump, not for joining the MAGA movement or putting on a red hat, but just for voting for Trump over Kamala Harris and over not voting at all. And I am going to take the opposing case and I am going to do an expert job on dismantling everything he's going to say. So that's what we're going to do. Jim, welcome back.
Thank you. Always fun to be here, Michael, my brother.
All right, Jim, go ahead. Let's go point by point with Trump. Well, I guess let me throw out some of the critiques of Trump. And I'm going to start, I think, with what for you is going to be the hardest one to argue against. Donald Trump tried to get his vice president, Mike Pence, to not fulfill his constitutional duty and certify the election. And Trump made a statement saying that in times when there's massive voting fraud, the Constitution can be, he didn't just say suspended. He had a different word, but I can't remember it right now. So we'll go with terminated, I think is what he said.
Yeah. He said
Uh,
all rules, regulations, even the Constitution can be terminated when
yes.
you have a massive election fraud of that kind, something like that.
So why isn't that disqualifying on its own?
Well, we have two candidates who apparently have a light connection to America's founding principles. Let's put it that way. Neither of them can be said to be defenders of the American constitutional system in its original sense at all, of course. That is unfortunately not on the ballot. The kinds of threats to the Constitution that Ms. Harris represent are of a different order, I would argue, though. She, for example, now, of course, much of this depends on the nature of Congress when she gets in there. But I think when making these determinations, we have to assess the worst case scenario in both cases. What do we get when we have Harris with a friendly Congress? What do we get with Trump if there were a friendly Congress? I know the odds makers are slightly favoring a Republican takeover of the Senate, but it is damn close. Both the House and the Senate are at near record tight margins of 50-50. So it's easy to imagine if things are just a little surprising in a couple of weeks, that either candidate might, with their coattails, as they call it, sweep in with some congressional help if that side gets elected. So it's not unreasonable to consider that. And I think logically we have to consider it from that standpoint. What would we get with Harris?
Well, hold
Now,
on one second, Jim. Okay, hold on one second. Here's why I'm holding you up. I agree that you have to take all factors into consideration when we're saying, what's this candidate going to do? We're going to look at the absolute extreme. If this candidate can do whatever the candidate wants, that's fair.
assume a friendly Congress.
But what we're ultimately boiling this down to in this type of an argument is pragmatic considerations. What is going to do the
Well,
least
that's
harm?
what my argument is going to be about.
Right. And it's going to
We're
be
not,
about the who's going to do the least harm. But if we're
right.
going to be pragmatists, we also have to consider likelihood.
Oh, I
And
wouldn't.
no, we're not pragmatists. I mean, we're going to
Yeah, I
be
would distinguish what I'm doing
no,
from
no, no,
pragmatism,
you're right. If we're going to vote
if I am
pragmatically,
taking into account that neither party is principled. That's what
yes.
I'm
So, but if we're
not being
going
a
to,
pragmatist,
if we're,
considering their
yeah,
pragmatism.
no, but if we're going to focus on effects, then
Yes.
we have to consider the likelihood of those effects. And the
Well,
likelihood is that the Republicans are going to take the Senate.
well,
It's not a a slam dunk, but that is
no.
the likelihood. So I think we have to factor that into
Oh,
our
okay.
decision.
We'll bear that in mind, though.
Yeah, you
But
have to bear it in mind. That's
even
all
as
I'm
I can,
saying.
even I, and we will, and we'll come back to both. And I think we have to play out both scenarios in our mind, actually, to be fair about it, because both are reasonable possibilities. Even if the probability slightly favors one thing over another, both are at least reasonable possibilities to consider, right? They're not arbitrary. In any case, the constitutional threats that Ms. Harris represents are systemic, ideological, and would amount to changes in actual policy, such as term limits on the Supreme Court, which is effective stacking, in my view, and really awful. Secondly, Democrats hate the Electoral College. Democrats hate the filibuster. Democrats hate, and we can keep going down the list of kind of democratic threats, as they put it, threats to democracy. I don't like that term, of course. It's really threats to our constitutional system. Threats to the system that protects individual rights is actually the focus, right? And so the threats that Harris represents are policy, permanent policy changes that she advocates, constitutionally speaking. Whereas Trump, and you can see it just from his comment, it was a matter of personal anger. It wasn't let's change the Constitution. It's wow, I think the election has been stolen from me, therefore I'm really pissed off, and therefore I'm threatening the Constitution in that way. Now, that doesn't make it okay, what he said. By no means does it make it okay. But when I measure the difference, one key measure is an ideologically consistent and systematic effort to change our constitutional system by a matter of permanent policy changes. And the other is a guy getting pissed off because he felt the election was stolen under these circumstances. So one is, I think on that score in particular, one would have to at least say that Kamala Harris, by intention, would be a greater and more systematic and more built-in policy difference when it comes to these constitutional changes. Trump at least does not advocate constitutional amendments, laws that would change the Supreme Court, laws that would, if anything, he is remarkable for a Republican of late, in the sense that he's not one of these classic moral majority types. He adopted abortion as a principle as a means of appeasing the right, in effect. He was appeasing the religious right, and you can see with many members of Congress demanding a national act of Congress to ban abortion nationwide, he will not join in with them. He is perfectly happy to let even relatively conservative states like Ohio and Kansas put abortion as a right into their state constitutions. That signals to me that Trump is not ideologically committed to the abortion cause or grounding everything in religion like the old majority types did. And so I distinguish the kinds of threats that Trump represents, the kind of threat that Trump represents, constitutionally speaking, let's put it that way, from either Harris or even the religious right. Because I think in both departments, he's slightly better.
Okay, so Jim, you named 3 issues where you said Kamala would change. You said the filibuster, the judges, the Electoral College. I happen to agree that the changes that she has said in the past she wants to, now she says she doesn't. Who really knows? But I agree that those policies would be bad. But note, only one of them is constitutional. Only the Electoral College is constitutional. That requires an amendment. That is going to be a very hard road to toe to get that done.
Well,
but as far as the filibuster goes,
the White House currently advocates term limits. You can go to the White House website. It currently advocates term limits for Supreme Court justices, and the inside scoop is that Kamala Harris was the one pushing that.
Sure,
just she was the Senator Kamala.
That would require a constitutional amendment.
Well, they were trying to do it by means of
I don't care what they try. I mean, look. We know the Constitution says judges have it as long as
the U.S. Supreme Court decides what the Constitution says. It's not James Madison anymore.
Well, the six justices on that court, right? That are conservatives are not going to determine that's constitutional for them to change.
But again, while it is true that they may not at this time, it is still a question of, and it could take years for such a case to get to court. If Kamala Harris is president, she might be able to alter the actual membership of the Supreme Court. And while it is being tested, there might be a period of problem. More than that, she very much advocates for this policy, and they believe they can do it in a constitutional manner. And I don't trust those 6 justices, frankly. It is true that they will, because they're jealously guarding their own powers in this respect, they would take any statutory alteration. Congress does have the power to create. They all of our federal courts, apart from the Supreme Court, are creations of law. And the
Sure.
jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, can be regulated by law according to Article 3 of the Constitution. So if we say in a law act of Congress, it's a very complex issue. If we say by act of Congress, the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court differs, and therefore we can place term limits via that complex mechanism, that would be a much more complex case to figure out. Not a constitutional amendment, a statute regulating the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, saying that depending on how
Jim,
long.
that would conflict directly with what the
I'm
Constitution
not saying that we can
says.
argue this one all day. I'm not saying that it would pass constitutional muster or that the
Right.
Supreme Court would approve of it.
But
All I'm saying is that it would be a
but here's, well,
complex
hold on.
issue
But
that
Jim,
might be done by statute.
but you,
That's how they currently want to do it.
but the initial three issues that you brought up, only one is constitutional.
Well,
Filibusters are not part of the
that's true.
Constitution.
That's true.
Neither are the amount of judges. So we're talking specifically about
Well,
a
not the, well,
constitutional
that's true. The
threat.
amount of, but the very cleverly, they're trying not to change the number of justices directly who decide directly. It'll still
No,
be,
it's
it'll
so
just be,
they're going to finagle it. I got that.
and finagle it in a way that might not require a constitutional amendment.
But as
And
far
create
as
a complex.
constitutional threats go, we already have 4 years of Donald Trump to see what his constitutional
And he left
muster
office.
is. Okay, but he wants back in to office.
Hey, but
Now,
the point is, he left office. You don't really think he'll be a dictator on day one.
I'm not talking about being a dictator. I'm
Okay,
talking about threat to the
so the
constitutional system.
overheated rhetoric about him, that being the last election,
No,
or
I'm not talking
Hitler
about
on
that. I'm talking
dictator on
about
day one,
no.
just like Hitler.
You're bringing up things that I'm not even.
Well,
I'm
I
not
am
even
bringing up the
invoking here.
general
Yeah,
assault, the way that is characterized.
no. What I'm saying is, as president, he banned bump stocks. That's unconstitutional. Period. He said that he would like to ban guns and then give due process second. These are assaults on the Bill of Rights. You froze on me.
Still?
No, you unfroze now. Good.
Okay, I'm good.
So, but my only point is that we already have his actions to
but
show
is
that
but
he's
is Kamala Harris worse on guns or better?
look
You brought up guns.
I
Bump stocks
think
in the
listen,
Constitution.
I think that this is kind of my point is I think that Kamala Harris is a threat to the Constitution. I think Donald Trump is a threat to the Constitution. I would not vote for either one of them. And in some ways, they're threats in different ways. Donald Trump wants to unleash the United States military to go searching for immigrants. That's what he says. Now, to say, well, that's just rhetoric, but we already know he doesn't respect the Constitution. We saw what he did on January 6th.
Well, give me an act like that he did and got away with that was unconstitutional during the 4 years.
Here's the inherent problem is he had checks on him before. He had people in his cabinet that were blocking him.
But you don't think the court or the Congress
Well,
will be
no, because he's filled all these, his cabinet is going to be filled, we already know, with sycophants. The Republicans that are going to win elections, he's been endorsing candidates basically based on who's going to kiss his ass. So he's going to have now far more leeway to do things that he could not do in the past.
Well, but then now we're speculating about what he will do, will try to do.
We have to. We have no choice. We know in the past that the people that worked for him said he tried to get away with doing things and they would not let him. We know that. We know that he tried to get his vice president to violate his constitutional duty to certify the election. We know that. We know that Trump's rhetoric is that the Constitution can be terminated when he sees fit. We know that he violated the Bill of Rights by banning bump stocks. We know that he wanted to force Apple to disclose their security secrets in order to catch criminals. We know that already. We know he's done that. We know he's unprincipled. We do know that Kamala Harris is awful too. But the problem is
awful in a principled, consistent, ideological way.
Well, in a way, that's better, though, Jim, because here's why. You know the way in which she will want to violate the Constitution. We know that. We don't know what he's going to do. I mean, we know on some things what he's going to do. We know on immigration what he's going to do. We know that he wants to deport whatever the number is now, 13 million people. We know how much that's going to cost. We know that the federal government doesn't actually have the authority to do such a thing. We know that he wants to unleash
Well,
the
they
military
do.
on them.
They do. And unfortunately, whatever the Constitution says or doesn't say,
They've already violated. I got
the
it, but
courts are happy to let the presidents do
they
a
very
great
much
deal
are.
with
We very
immigration.
much are. But the
Yes.
point here is he's not a constitutionalist, and
Oh, I don't understand.
he will violate the Constitution in
Yeah. Well, the
service of his
question
own
is, where
ego.
do you think do you honestly think that the greater threat is from a principled opponent to the Constitution who would do everything she could to rhetorically and materially bring
I
systematic
don't
policy?
know. I don't know which is the greater threat. I know they're both horrible. And when I'm faced with that type of decision, I'd rather not choose. I do know this though. Back to the likelihood that we're going to have a Republican Senate, which is the probability. A Republican Senate would be a far stronger check on Kamala Harris than they're going to be to Donald Trump. This is a guy who ran up the debt by $7 trillion. He's a guy that has believed in tariffs his whole life and wants to put across the board tariffs, the percentage of tariffs
These
he's going to
just the
put on
most
China
bizarre
changes.
things. He's still doubling down on the China pays the tariffs,
Right,
not American
right.
consumer, which is
So,
just a
and if
bizarre
Republicans
misstatement, ridiculous hyperbole.
and the odds are that the Republicans are going to take the Senate. And if he's going to get carte blanche to do whatever he wants if they have the Senate, Kamala won't if they have the Senate. So we kind of, when you're weighing this vote, have to weigh all of that.
We do.
So the proper thing, or I don't know about if proper is even a proper term in these circumstances, but the most strategic thing to do would be to vote Republican down ballot and get Kamala in as president so that you have
Oh, I'm not sure because there's a
mixed
lot that a
government.
president we've only discussed one dimension of the issues,
We'll get
constitutional
to more.
threats, and it could be that neither candidate really can do anything much to harm the Constitution. And it could be that 4 years from now, you and I will be sitting doing a podcast saying, "Gosh, we're both hyperventilating about threats to the Constitution, and the system remains pretty much the same."
Well,
That is a very likely
well, here's
outcome.
the thing. Yeah, the likeliest outcome is that the country is strong. Despite all the flaws that we see in it and the way in which it's changed from the Constitution, I doubt, regardless of which candidate gets in, we're going to have the evisceration
Especially
of the status quo.
constitutional,
Yeah,
especially constant. Those
as
are
the
the
status
hardest
quo.
to
Yeah,
change.
I don't think you're going
Okay,
to
so
see an
so that's the
evisceration.
Constitution as such is the hardest thing for them to, although both represent a degree of threat to them. I think there is a difference in degree and actually in kind, given the nature of the threats. But the whole of constitutional threats are probably the least of our reasonable fears.
They, I would say probably, but you do have one candidate who, in principle, says the Constitution can be tossed out.
And
Kamala
we
plays
have
lip
another
service to
candidate
it.
in principle who would alter, if she could, she would
Sure,
much more dramatically and systematically
sure.
get policy to
But
destroy the
Jim,
Constitution.
who do you think would be more likely to adhere to the restraints imposed on her by a cabinet or by Congress or by the court? Trump or Kamala?
You mean restrained by her own people?
Restrained by both her people and by the makeup
I
of
think the
Congress.
courts will probably restrain them both. I think
Yes.
that their
And I
own
think Trump
cabinets
is
will
less
like,
likely to
and I
listen to
think
what the
I
courts
think
say.
that I think that Kamala will have a cabinet very much like Biden's, which will not give a peep of opposition to her. See, when Trump is seeking this kind of loyalty, what he's seeking is the kind of loyalty that Democrats always get from their minions.
No, sir. That's not true, Jim. Come
Give me an
on.
example.
That's not true.
Give me an
You
example of like when Nixon had Watergate, of something like Barry Goldwater and the senators going to
no.
Nixon saying, "You got to go, buddy."
No, you don't. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about you do not have in the modern era a Democrat that gets the kind of loyalty that Trump wants. You
Oh,
have Trump.
oh,
You have well, let's just see. You always had a Joe Lieberman for instance, he was a Democrat, and he would come out against his party, against
Oh, you
the
should
liberal
say you don't
things.
think there are any Republicans in Congress? In
I
fact, there's probably more
what I
Lieberman
think,
types in the Republican Party than there are. The Liebermans
no,
have been driven out by a matter of
no.
why Lieberman is gone is precisely the issue I'm talking about. Lieberman was forced out of his party before he died. He was ridiculed by his own party because he was disloyal. No, Democrats are in fact much more goose-stepping loyal to their side, and people like Lieberman are much easier marginalized than on the Republican
Do
side.
you think, hold on, let me just say it seriously.
Yeah,
Do you think
seriously, yeah.
so Donald Trump says in 2015 or 16, John McCain is not a hero. John McCain, he says because John McCain got caught, he likes his heroes not to get caught. The Republicans stay with him. Donald Trump recently talked about another man's private parts, about Arnold Palmer's private parts. Do you think that if a Democrat it was up there saying that the Democrats would walk lockstep with him and stay with him? Do you think that the Democrats would have stayed with somebody that called
Oh
for his
yeah.
vice
Oh
president?
yeah.
Well,
Oh
you
yeah.
got to prove that to
Democrats
me,
say
Jim.
racist things outright, as least as bad as Trump,
I
and
hate
get
the
away with it
goddamn Democrats.
routinely.
I don't even know why I'm here. I'm not.
Routinely get away
Yeah.
with Democrats will fall right into line, no matter how offensive what
You
Biden.
think, hold on, you think that there's that one of the Democrats right now, Kamala, could achieve what Trump can achieve in summoning his people to go
Oh, much more
protest?
so. I
Oh, yeah,
think
I'll
Democrats
prove it. You got to give me some evidence. Give me some
Oh
evidence of
no!
that.
My experience is that Democrats are much more loyal and unified.
I am looking for
A
some
hundred years
evidence.
ago, Will Rogers, the famous comedian, said, I don't belong to any organized political party. I'm a Democrat."
Yeah,
Well, I think that the opposite is true 100 years later. I think the Democratic Party is
Jim,
far more unified, a
I
far
want an
more
example.
well-oiled
Hold on.
machine,
I
a
want an
far
example.
more powerful machine
Jimmy,
of
I need an
organization.
example of where Kamala Harris right now could call for her followers to storm the Congress, to storm the Capitol, and where she would be calling for her vice president to not
I think it'd be
certify the
far
election.
easier for her.
Prove it. Give me an example.
That
Just give me an example.
the way the left protests is normally violent, the right does not protest in the same way.
No,
There's far more
that's a
discipline
different
among the
thing.
Democrats in Congress than there is
Who
among Republicans in
I'm
Congress.
looking for an example where
Well, I
Kamala
can't.
Harris.
Well, obviously she's not president, and
Well,
she hasn't done any such
Well,
thing.
okay,
You're asking
give
for
me
a
Obama, where Obama
hypothetical.
had the type of power amongst his
Obama could,
followers.
but Obama, no matter what Obama said, for example, Obama completely defended a black. That just comes off the top of my head. Defended this black professor, said an outrageous anti-police remark, racist remark. Everyone in the
Henry Louis
media,
Gates. Yes.
everyone in the media
Yes.
defended him. Trump says
Yeah.
less than that, and the
Yeah.
media come down on him like a
But
ton of bricks.
Jim, I think we're talking about two different things here right now. And it might be my fault because we did start talking about party loyalists that were in the party. I'm talking about their followers, not senators, not Congress, not the media. I'm
Well,
talking
look at the
about rank and
Hamas
file.
demonstrators. That's your typical Democrat, or the 2020 rioters, George Floyd rioters. Your Antifa types. Those are how you demonstrate if you're on the left.
Yeah, I'm not arguing about that.
Now,
I'm
compare
talking
that to
about the
January 6th.
Jim. I'm talking
The
about the
actual comparison between the Democrat goose steppers
hold
are
on.
2020 rioters and January
Okay,
6th.
what Democrat presidential candidate called for that?
Well, we haven't had such a thing,
But
so I can't.
that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying you when you're talking about the
Okay, so
left and
you're
the
asking me to
anti
hypothetically believe that some
because
Democrat wouldn't have gone along,
no,
wouldn't have raised the criminal
because what
problem
I'm
of
saying, Jim,
defense.
is we have a real world example right now of a cult like following of Donald Trump. The likes that the closest thing I've seen on the left in my life was with Obama.
Oh, the cult
But
of Kamala Harris is already developed. Are you kidding? She can get away with not explaining her changes of position across the board, sweeping changes of position. And unlike, I mean, it's hilarious. The reason why Ayn Rand, for example, voted for Nixon over McGovern was a comparison of this kind. When you look at her writings, for example, in 1971 and 72, they're absolutely fascinating in the sense that she was very, very harsh on Mr. Nixon across the board. But then she discusses Mr. McGovern and how Mr. McGovern was completely changing his positions, trying to hide who he was. And Ayn Rand said, if in the course of 3 months, a man should be free to change his mind, said McGovern. Ayn Rand said, well, true enough, but in the course of 3 months, this guy changed across the board as a matter of a sweeping policy and his mind. Kamala Harris is a perfect example of just that. And no one on the left to know that the religious cult-like mentality, watch The View. You can just watch that interview Kamala Harris, who could do no wrong, can never pose any threat. She has honestly changed her mind on all these things. We don't even need to ask her
Jim,
about
are you, hold on, Jim, hold on. Are you seriously? I don't disagree with what you're saying about The View in the media. You think that Kamala Harris has the type of rank and file following that Donald Trump has in that kind of
well,
loyalty?
she has not yet established. They have to. Look. She is so quick, it is not even fair to judge her on that score, Michael. I would say that is non-objective. But starting just from a couple of months ago, in the space of 3 months, speaking of space of 3 months, which was Ayn Rand was saying, there is an amazing lockstep defense of
She
her,
flip-flops
sweepingly across the
Jim,
board.
and they want to vote for her, and they're going to, I got that. Trump, prior to ever being elected president, said I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and my people would stick with me.
I don't find that attractive at all.
Hold on. They stuck with him through that. They stuck with him through the presidency. They stuck with him through January 6th. They're still with him now. They've stuck with him through flip-flops, through deficits. The MAGA people are the people who claim they hate vaccines and they hate lockdowns. Trump advocated lockdowns, pushed the vaccine. They don't turn on him. What I'm saying is that we've got 10 years of a cult
with
following.
COVID, since you raised COVID, that's a really interesting one. There is no question that Trump financed the COVID lockdowns and gave us Dr. Fauci, who recommended the lockdown.
Yeah, that's all terrible. But what I'm saying is, we can talk about that. I
was going to contrast. Now, let me get to the other side. Biden larded $1 trillion plus more on top of that spending, and it was Democrat governors who had the most draconian lockdowns.
Yeah,
and
Jim, but I'm not talking
Democrats
about the effects
like
of the
James
policy.
Fonda, who said COVID is God's gift to the left.
Jim, I'm not talking
Kamala
about
Harris
policy.
is one of those kind.
Yeah, well, she is. She sucks. I'm
Okay,
talking about
so she would be much worse on things like
hold
COVID.
on, but right now I'm not talking about how bad he was on COVID.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is the fact that his people didn't abandon him. That no matter
Right.
how bad he is, they stick.
Show me an
with
example
him.
of Democrats abandoning one of their own.
I'll tell you what, if Kamala Harris came out right now and said, look, I will not appoint justices to the Supreme Court who are going to mess with the Second Amendment, they would abandon her in droves.
No, they would understand. They would be like Bernie Sanders the other day.
They would.
She's saying what she says to get elected. Bernie just mask slip and understand that it was a solid lie. I can't believe.
So hold on. Okay,
I can predict something more about Kamala Harris. Because she is more principled, I would know that she was lying if she said that.
Jim,
so would Bernie Sanders.
Hold on a second.
And Bernie Sanders would be reassuring the left. Don't worry, she's saying what she's saying.
Are you seriously sitting there, Jim? Aside from you trying to steel man the argument, you really believe Kamala has a cult-like following like Trump has?
I think all Democrats have a cult-like devotion to their politics.
On
the left, politics is their religion.
Hold on. I'm asking you if Kamala Harris as an individual has the type of following that Donald Trump has.
No, but she doesn't need it to have all the same effect and worse that he does for his cult.
No, because Kamala Harris cannot come out and order her followers or suggest to her followers that they do the type of things that Trump can do. She cannot do that. You know she can't do that.
I don't know what you mean.
What I mean is,
things Trump can do.
For instance,
I think she'd be able to get away with Trump's comments and behavior after the election that Trump did.
Absolutely,
any Democrat could get away with what Trump did after the election.
You think
what Trump did following the 2020 election would be you'd have the media defending him for doing it. That's the difference.
Jim, would Kamala Harris be able to get candidates canceled the way Trump can?
Yeah. Democrats do it all the time. Where's Lieberman? You mentioned poor old Senator Lieberman. All right.
No individual did that to him, Jim. No
What?
individual did that to
The
Lieberman.
party did that to him.
The whole party did it to him.
Okay.
That's the whole
If we're going to
thing.
go individual versus collective, I'm going to say it's irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant.
Okay,
It's
because it's
not.
personal to Trump
No,
versus collective to the party.
Because Trump as an
The Democratic
individual
Party has religious fanatical loyalty to their
to
ideology.
their party, yes.
That's right.
And
And
I'm
so they
saying
can
there's
get
a
away with
big
whatever
difference.
Trump got away with, even with more media support. Only it's not individual. You're right. Get rid of Trump, and there might be more disunity on the Republican right. That's all.
Right. If you
That makes Republicans safer in this respect, not more dangerous.
How, Jim?
It's unique to Trump.
It's
Once
unique to Trump,
done,
but he's the one running for president.
well, that's true. But that doesn't change the fact that
We're talking
all the evils that you associate with this cult of Trump are already built into the party as a whole.
No, they aren't. They're not. They're just not, Jim. It's just not true. What the Democrats never called for the type of things he called for on January 6th. They just didn't. It's just not true.
No, Trump was just outbidding them and calling an election.
It's just not true. You haven't seen
They were
Democrats.
the ones who pioneered the illegitimate election thing. Trump just took it to a new level. They were the ones who pioneered the demonization.
But that's
Trump
a
just
problem.
took it to a new level.
Listen, I don't disagree, and I've supported every Republican in my lifetime other than Trump. But he did take it to a new level. You can't get away from that. You don't have Democrats in rallies calling for people to be punched in the face.
No, they actually punch people in the face.
No, but you
have Democrats saying, get in their face, go to restaurants. You had an assassination attempt on Kavanaugh that went they don't care.
Yes,
beat up.
I got
Are you kidding? The left endorses violence,
Jim,
left and
I'm
right.
Not, Jim, I am not.
And they endorse actual violence.
Jim, we are not talking.
I will punch you in the face.
They
protect people who do punch people
Jim,
in the face.
You are straying so far from the discussion in order to make this argument that it's absurd. Yes, because we're talking about.
You said Trump says punch people in the face.
Jim,
they defend punchers in the face.
Jim, we are talking about presidential candidates,
right?
And we're talking about comparing Trump to Kamala. You've never seen a Democratic presidential candidate in their rally say, punch that guy in the face, go grab him, get him out of here.
I heard Joe Biden say, I would like to go take Trump behind the
He would like to take Trump. He said, in the olden days, I'd take Trump behind the shed.
Right.
That's what he said.
A similar thing.
Yeah.
I would like
that is not the same as calling for somebody in your rally to punch somebody else at your rally in the face, which Trump has done. Okay. It's not the same thing.
Did the person get punched?
There was a fight one time where the guy did hit somebody and Trump said, I'll pay his bail. Yes, that did happen.
Well, if there was a fight and he said, pay the bail, Kamala Harris was paying the bail for all the 2020
she did.
rioters. She seems to be far worse.
Listen,
that's Kamala.
She was going to pay for the bail, yes, but she wasn't calling for violence.
Oh, yes, she was. She said protests should go on and will go on and should go on.
And she said that they should she said they should commit acts of violence.
No, 2020 riots are good.
And Jim,
they won't stop and they shouldn't stop.
Did they
That's what she said in 2020.
Jim, did the people this portion of the discussion has to do with the power of an individual. And all I'm asking you is, do you think that Kamala Harris has the same power to command her following that Trump does to command his?
Yes.
Okay. You've got to present some evidence and you can't.
Well, no, I think that it's obvious. I mean, she's defending the 2020 rioters, and it was much more widespread and real violence than the one. You brought up one little punch in a fight. Yes. I'm bringing up the 2020 riots.
Yes.
She is much worse a violent threat, and her minions will do violence much more easily. I don't understand. What's the distinction you're drawing?
Because I'm talking about the power of one man or one woman to command people to do things. And my point to you is that Kamala Harris does not have the cult following that Trump does.
Is there any limit to, do you think you think that millions of Americans would do whatever Trump said?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Well, what do you mean by whatever he said? I don't know.
Well, like he said, shoot someone in broad daylight and actually get away with it.
I think that if Trump were to do that, they wouldn't abandon him. I think he's right.
They wouldn't?
They would not abandon him. No.
Trump was not engaged in one of his typical instances of hyperbole.
No, I have seen far too much from Trump where he's flip-flopped positions, where he said extreme things, where he said things that if a Democrat said them, the MAGA would go sick. But because Trump says them, They don't
Well,
abandon
that's
him.
true.
They love
That's
him. All
absolutely
I'm
true.
saying is
They'll
that
forgive the same thing from Trump that they wouldn't forgive from
never
Democrats.
from anybody else. And all I'm
Yeah.
saying is that Kamala does not have that kind of following as an individual.
Oh, they'd twist themselves into pretzels to defend whatever position.
Where is the
It happens every day in the
listen,
Biden administration on the
Jim,
media.
Jim, again, you went back to the media. I'm talking about rank and file followers. Where does Kamala have something
I
similar to the
can't.
MAGA
Okay, if
movement?
we're going to start psychologizing
This
masses,
is not psychologizing. We have the evidence. We have
yeah,
10
well,
years
give
of
me
evidence.
evidence of Trump like shooting someone and getting away with
No,
it.
I can give you evidence of what he said about John McCain. I can tell you what he said about having
Okay,
sex with his own daughter. I can tell you what he said talking about Arnold Palmer. I can tell you about him banning bump stocks, about saying
he is
yeah,
gross.
yes,
His
but they don't
personal.
abandon him, Jim. That's what I'm saying. It's not about
Well,
whether he's
but
gross.
but but you know, Biden can say, okay, make racist remarks. Biden can say all kinds of things, about Indians at 7-Elevens or whatever, or about Obama, being a clean black guy, or what all the things that Biden said. He gets away with it.
Wait a second. At the
Media,
time, no, 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 no. At the time he said that about Obama, he did not get away with it. That's not true.
he
He
became
did
his
not
vice
get away with
president.
it. Huh? Yeah,
He became his vice president.
but that by and large, that partly cost him his candidacy. He got reamed for saying that at the time. Then
Yeah,
subsequently, yes,
not in a way,
Obama,
but you see, but does that mean that they let? Oh wait, they made him vice president.
yeah,
That's how much the
Obama,
Democrats
no,
disciplined him.
Obama did pick him.
Right.
Yes.
That's how disciplined the Democrats are about such
I
things.
don't disagree with that. That Obama picked him, but he didn't
Right.
suffer no backlash.
But the
Trump
point is,
from his
Democrats say outrageous things and get away with them all the time.
Democrats do. I don't disagree with you, Jim. You're talking
What's your
you're
point?
My point is, as in again, we're talking about Kamala Harris versus Trump. And I'm telling you, and I'm asking you, does Kamala Harris have a following like Trump has?
No.
No, that's my
But then
only
again,
point from
Trump
the
doesn't have a
get-go.
following like the Democratic Party either.
Well, he has a similar thing now. He does. And that's kind of my point is that the Democrats are standard. We know what the Democrats are. I'm
Okay.
not disagreeing that I'm
So,
talking about Trump as an individual poses a unique danger. Now, I'm not saying he's an Adolf Hitler. I'm saying that when you're going to the ballot box and you're going to choose between these two candidates, Kamala or Trump, I would vote neither for all of the reasons that you and I have both given. I just do not see Trump as such a
I haven't
superior
I
person.
haven't really even made the case. You
No, you're that's what you're here to do is to
right.
make the case for voting for Trump. If you're going to say
No,
to
no,
me
I'm here to make yeah,
that
I'm here to
no, yeah, not that you're going to vote for
yeah, and I
him as
haven't
an
even begun to get
individual.
into Harris's issues, why that
No,
might be
no,
because
we're going to.
okay.
I wanted to go issue by issue on this particular. This was one issue on the Constitution
And
to
I
me.
actually think that in this issue, there's really nothing to choose except to say that Harris would, if she could, systemically change
Listen,
our Constitution.
listen.
He
I,
gets angry and pissed off at a personal affront,
Jim,
and
we
will
moved. Jim, my point is that they both suck on the Constitution. He's not so much better than her to warrant a vote from me.
on
He
that. Oh, you mean on that score, or you mean
when
on other
No,
scores?
when we're going issue by issue. So the first
Okay,
issue we talked about was the Constitution.
right.
Then we moved on and we talked about the followings of the two. And what
Okay.
I'm saying is on the Constitution, it's basically for me a wash. They're both horrible.
You
And
ask two men on the street interviews with Democrats, they do not know what is up. It is pure religion, and yet they will religiously run off a cliff when given the orders by the Democratic Party. The kind of unity, organization,
but
loyalty,
because but
blind
Jim, hold
loyalty
on.
the
But
Democrats have
because
is remarkable.
it's to the Democrat ideology, right? That's what you said earlier. They're principled.
Well, it's not. I do believe they are more ideological, but it is
Okay.
also more tribal.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, no, 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 not than Trump. Then traditional Republicans, I would agree, but not in the case of Trump. The tribalism is deep on both sides now. And the difference with Trump is the tribalism revolves around him.
well,
Because
how did Kamala Harris put it? She said, they said, well, what is the difference between you and Biden? Well, obviously, I'm not Joe Biden.
yeah, it was stupid. She's
Like
going to do the
she's
same things
pointing
he
to the
did.
perceptual.
Yeah.
She's a woman. She's
Yeah,
of
but that
color.
it, but
She's
no, but that's an
younger. She
irrelevant. It's an
physical
irrelevant distinction.
characteristics is what she was pointing
But
to.
Jim,
Unconceptual,
but
tribal,
Democrats,
and the tribalism on the left is unparalleled in modern history in America.
except for with Trump,
Well, Trump is again. If
but it's
Trump is bad, it's because he is echoing what they made a regular policy.
regardless of what the reason for Trump is, we're dealing with Trump. That's what we're dealing with. I'm
Right.
not.
So
Listen,
Trump is a
look at
feeble echo of what
look
they've
at
been for
that.
decades.
Listen. When they said that John McCain or Mitt Romney, whoever wants to push grandma off the cliff, they were saying, "Oh, listen." I saw Joe Biden behave like an absolute jerk when he debated Paul Ryan. I have no love for the man. I have no love for Kamala Harris. I think she's horrible, and I think there's tribalism on both sides. But with the Democrats, the tribalism is to the party. With Trump, it's to
Oh
Trump.
no, it's to races. It is to or people. They
Sure,
are
it's
outright.
all yeah, it's identity politics, it's all that, but it surrounds around the party
You
and
know, Trump
party
says disturbing
loyalty.
things about the genes of immigrants or how they poison the blood and stuff. But again, the difference is the Democrats have systemically built in racism by policy and law. Their tribalism is not only a matter of look at me, like Harris says, but now our actual policies are going to take into account the fact that you are whatever
It's
intersectional group you belong to.
it's
And that's
horrible.
going to be part of law.
Yeah,
So that
And
difference
Trump
is
and
they want
Trump
to institution.
yeah,
They have been
hold on.
institutionalizing
Jim,
that kind of
And
tribalism.
Trump wants to use the United States military to round up illegals and get them out of the country.
And you don't think he'll face any problem with the courts with that?
Well, I don't think the
No
Supreme Court
checks.
will.
His loyalists, even in the courts.
I think that if he gets the Republican Senate and if they keep the House, no, I don't think he'll get any checks. I think he'll get checks in lower level courts when it gets to the Supreme Court.
The
I
Supreme
then
Court would was. You think this Supreme Court, simply because it was appointed by Trump, will go with Trump every time? I
I
have
don't
good reason to say the opposite. They
um
have ruled against Trump. Trump's
I
own judges on the Supreme Court
I
have
don't
ruled against Trump.
Jim, I don't ultimately know what they'll do. I do
Oh,
know I don't I can't predict. I do think though that that's what Trump would do if he can get away with it. I think he'll implement the policy and then it will go to the court and they'll have to try to finagle that all out. And I agree
I,
with you. Listen, you're not going to get me here defending Kamala Harris. My point isn't vote for Kamala. My point is vote neither. Vote Republicans down ballot
well,
would be the smarter
my
thing to
point is
do.
there is a difference, a quantitative and qualitative difference of a certain kind that could justify absolutely voting for Trump to prevent the statism of Harris.
But what about the statism of Trump, Jim?
Yeah. Okay, sitting here honestly, all of the things being equal, President Harris versus President Trump, with a friendly Congress, without a friendly Congress, who would, if they could, spend more, tax more, regulate more the economy?
Spend more?
Mm-hmm.
That's tough. I don't know because Trump will spend an awful lot on the military. He showed
Well, let's
no
see.
discretion at all.
Yeah, we spent on military and other stuff, and spending grew faster under Trump than it did in
Right.
3 years under Trump, more than it did in
Yeah.
8 years under Obama.
And in actuality, the projections are, and I'm not a big fan of them, but that's what we have. The
Because
projections are
they don't dynamically rate tax cuts, for example.
no, but we do know under the Trump tax because last time we didn't exactly have the
No,
granted the
revenues did
economy.
increase. It's just that his
No,
spending
but
increased so
yeah,
much
but the
faster.
economy didn't do what Trump said it was going to do.
No, it did not. No, it didn't.
No,
Because, because in fact, he was not the deregulator he claims to be.
no, he wasn't.
But
So
at least it's interesting because he calls himself a deregulator. Even
it's
if
interesting because
even
he
if he,
lies.
even well, does tell you Democrats will say do the same thing all the time with
They
capitalism.
do. They
Right.
suck.
So let's wait a minute. Let's compare and contrast. Do you think that Trump would sincerely yearn to have fewer regulations and be able to wear that badge if he could, as opposed to a Democrat who would say, "Oh yeah, I'm a capitalist," and their capitalist credential, like Kamala Harris on 60
Well, she's
Minutes, called
not, but neither is he. So on taxes, if you're
Ayn Rand
talking
had a great line in
oh,
1972 about McGovern, comparing to McGovern and Nixon. She said, "You both are hypocrites." She said Mr. Nixon both articulate both altruistic statism and patriotic Americanism. In the case of Mr. Nixon, he yearns to be his Americanism is what he yearns for, and the altruistic statism is the front. With McGovern, the altruistic statism is what's real, and the Americanism is the front. I think a very similar thing could be said about Kamala Harris and Trump today.
Okay.
Trump would love to be able to prove that he's the deregulator, the more capitalistic comparatively.
Oh, we'll get to that in a minute. But first, I want to go by the things that you mentioned. So first, you mentioned spending. I have no reason to believe that either candidate will spend more than the other.
Oh, I do. I think Kamala Harris would if she could.
Well, we are. Well, wait a second.
She would create whole new programs. She'd create whole new, if she could, she would create. First of all, I don't believe her lies about not believing in socialized medicine anymore. I think that's like Bernie Sanders. I think she's just saying whatever it takes to get elected. If she could, she would impose Medicare for all, total socialized medicine, eliminate, just for example, just Jim, one example.
Okay. But she won't spend as much as Trump on the military. She won't spend as much as Trump on deportations. Trump wants to spend an awful lot of money on deportations. Trump also wants paid family leave.
So does she.
Right. And we also, the two of us,
she wants the child tax credit to go up.
Both of us also, we don't know what emergencies might come up where they'd spend. All I'm saying is I'm not sitting here saying Trump will definitely spend more. I'm just saying I don't know who's going to spend more.
I think President Harris, let's imagine President Harris during a COVID lockdown. She would be much more likely to want more spending than Trump did at the time.
Whoa. Trump was pushing at the end for another like $2 trillion in spending that he didn't get.
Gave it to us, and I think she's worse than Biden.
Yeah. Well, we don't. Okay, you think, but I'm going with what I don't.
Her verbiage in 2020 made her clear. She had to withdraw from the race because she was so further to the left than Biden.
Biden was far to the left. She was.
But Biden ran as a quote.
Jim, what? But there's zero evidence that Trump has any restraints on him for spending.
Oh,
and here's the bottom line. You're ultimately, if you're going to say, well, Trump, and this kind of is my point, right? Let's say I even give it to you. Let's say that Kamala is going to drive up the debt by $8 trillion and Trump by $5 trillion, right? That's not something that I'm going to sanction with my vote. It's not something that I think is going to be so much better for the country that we got $5 trillion rather than $8 trillion in debt. So I'm not voting for either one of them. Now you said taxes.
Well, I think that a difference of that kind is worth considering. At least worth considering.
Hold on. But now you've said, well, you asked me about taxes. So corporate tax rates, Trump was way better than Harris. Top tax rates, Trump is better than Harris. But then when you get to middle class taxes, Kamala says she wants to cut middle class taxes, and Trump wants to have a horrible tax on Americans in the form of tariffs. So again, if you're saying to me, well, Trump is
Kamala Harris also proposes an unprecedented wealth tax, a tax on unrealized capital gains, such as never has existed before. Yeah. And that would tax people's wealth in an unprecedented socialist way.
It's absolutely
something that
awful.
Trump would never propose in a million years.
And it's absolutely awful. It's absolutely horrible. But again, that's actually on taxes is the one issue where
tariffs is something that America has dealt with for many, many decades.
Not as high as he wants them, Jim.
Not as high as he wants them, but there are many. But look, no. It was the standard labor Democrat position to say.
Yeah, and I'm going to give Jim. I'm going to give Trump the advantage on taxes anyway. All I'm saying is just because he has the advantage on her doesn't mean he's good.
Okay, but now we've gone through taxes and spending and regulations. I'm sure Harris will be worse
on regulations. On regulations, probably, but he's no deregulator.
He's no deregulator. Okay. He claims to be, and he really didn't.
No.
But the point is that one could say, for example. When Biden came into office, he put Alaskan oil off the limit, off the chart. You can't drill or explore for more oil in Alaska. He ended the pipeline. What was it? The XL pipeline. He immediately starts cutting. Obviously, they're hostile to fossil fuels in principle, she would impose still worse environmental. She probably, if she could get away with it, would give us the Green New Deal. She was a
Okay.
co-sponsor of it.
Okay, Jim, I'm giving you two
So
things.
if she could get if she had a friendly Congress, she would probably pass if she
See, I don't
could.
like this method of arguing about if she had, because when we talk about if well, Trump wants to unleash the military on people, you say, but he's going to have checks. But if it comes to her, well, if she could get away with it, you have to keep the same standard for both of them. So
Well,
it's either got to be if they're
I
going to
think
have
that the
checks
courts
or they're
would.
not going to
I
have
think the
checks.
courts would obviously say you can't use the army domestically. We have laws against it, and the Supreme Court would smack Trump back down. I think that's pretty probable. On the other hand, if she had a friendly Congress, she would probably try and get away with both
But the
agreeing.
chances are she's not going to have a friendly Congress.
Okay, but the point though is that at least I'm laying out what the criteria of my ifs are.
Yeah, here this is ultimately kind of gets me exactly what my whole point is. So on the Constitution, they both suck, both of them horrible, right?
You don't
So
see a difference.
I see a difference in rhetoric and actual. If you ask me which one of them has more respect for the Constitution, I say neither has any. If you I'm going to get to Trump in a second about why I think that, but first I just want to say this: when it comes to the following of the individual, I say Trump is worse. Trump has a far stronger cult following than Kamala. The Democratic Party is commensurate with Trump, but not Kamala as a
Only
person.
it's a whole party.
No, it is, but that's the whole point is you have a whole
Okay.
party apparatus. But we know what that party stands for. Trump changes on a whim and his followers go with him. Kamala does not have that. She simply
I don't think
does
Trump
not.
changes on a whim. I think Trump is very sensitive to being popular, and he wants to appease the emotions of
Well,
of
but
his followers
that's no,
possible.
but that's here's the but this is the and
He's
this
not
gets
a he's not a principled
no,
advocate of
no,
Americanism.
Trump
He's an
ultimately
emotionalist.
okay,
He is
he's an
he is a
emotionalist.
he is a
Jim,
hyperbolic. His Americanism is a matter of passions, not principles.
this is I think. So let me just say, give you a few things that Trump has done that I think disqualify him from my position,
Just
from my
disqualify him, whatever the comparison.
where I could never vote for him. Right now, if
Right.
you're talking about if you had Adolf Hitler, I mean, obviously you can push me to an extreme where someone running against him, I would say I'd rather have Trump and I'd vote for Trump. But I'm
Well,
talking,
I'd put it
but
this way.
I'm talking
The re-
status quo,
the reason
status quo.
why I wouldn't vote for Hitler versus Stalin, apart from the fact that they're both way over the edge, is that there's nothing much to choose between them. It's
No,
the same reason that Ayn Rand didn't vote for Adlai Stevenson or Dwight
right,
Eisenhower. It's
right,
Dwight Eisenhower and Adlai
yeah,
Stevenson, Hitler or
yes,
Stalin.
right.
It's a question of there's nothing much to choose from.
No,
And
so
even
this
if
is the
they
thing.
are authoritarian, if there is a significant degree difference, I'm
Yeah,
going for the less authoritarian.
if the degree it depends on how much
If
it
there is a
is,
significant
right?
difference in the
And what I'm saying
degree,
to you is within the
if one evil
status
really
quo,
is noticeably lesser than the
Jim,
other evil.
Jim, for the love of God, within the status quo of the people that are likely to be the Democratic nominee and run against Trump, right? Not the extreme that I can imagine. I would never vote for Trump. I would never vote for a Democrat. I've never supported a Democrat. I never would. But let's just look at some of the things he's done that to me are just reprehensible. First of all, asking his vice president to not certify the election. That's huge to me. That's huge. I mean, that's like, come on. Then, I mean, just this taking Laura Loomer, for instance, to the 9/11 ceremony. This is a woman who has propagated that the United States government was responsible for 9/11, and he takes her to the ceremony. The things that he said, which I have no reason to doubt, because I know what his actual statements were, what he said about John McCain. I have no reason to doubt that he said those things about the World War I veterans. Like those are things recently saying about General Milley and his former chief of staff Kelly, he doesn't respect them as soldiers. Like saying those types of things reveal something about a man's character that I just could not bless him with
I'm not going to defend Donald Trump's
with my
character.
vote. Now, This is what
Donald Trump's character is in many ways reprehensible. He
no,
is
it is.
he is a megalomaniac, braggart. I mean, he's braggadocio, even for a politician, sets
He
new
fits,
records.
Jim. Now, you and I are
He's
both
given
familiar, Jim.
ridiculous, bizarre statements, unbelievable hyperbole. He is involved in harsh personal attacks on his enemies. I can defend none of that. No one could.
I believe in based on my a lot. So when I say what I'm going to say, understand that you know, but I'm just saying for anybody that's just new listening to the show,
Yeah.
what I'm about to say from personal experience within my own mind, with personal experience with other people in the criminal lifestyle, personal experience being around criminals for 25 years in prison, doing groups, doing programs, extensive study on the makeup of the criminal mind, a degree, associate's degree in psychology, and a lot of reading on psychology. I firmly believe that Donald Trump is a narcissistic sociopath. And he really, if you go through Stanton Samonow's
Narcissistic
52,
bully. He really
yeah.
is. There's
And
no
with
doubt
that
he
said,
shows strong indications of being
when we
a
talk
real
about,
bully and truly narcissistic.
yeah, his
What can are you going to get a major argument from me?
no, I'm
The
not.
man's a
No,
bully. The
no.
man's a narcissist.
Yes. And what
I'll
I'm
just
going,
tell you that
no,
outright.
and you agree. And what I'm saying to you is that when you take that aspect of his character where everything is in service of his own ego, he'll flip on a dime on his own ego. He has people that will follow him with those flips in service of his own ego that will claim it's actually principled. I've had many arguments. When you have that and you combine it with the Laura Loomer stuff and the criticizing the military stuff, and when you have what he did on January 6th, all that stuff, aside from my policy differences with him, which I hate, but I will agree that some of his policies, and definitely his Supreme Court picks, are better than Kamala's. The Supreme
You'll say
Court,
that there is a difference in degree and sometimes in kind that makes him better in
I
some
will
way than
say
Harris.
that
You see that?
this is what I'm going to say. If it were all
Yeah.
just policy, and we
Yeah.
eliminated everything else, then I would vote for whatever Republican that was pushing these policies, except maybe the immigration thing. That's tough. That's tough for me.
Well, yeah.
That's tough.
Well,
When he's
immigration is a very complex issue, though, now.
no,
And
but when he but Jim, when he talks
handing
about
gift cards and cell phones and hotel rooms and medical
Jim,
care to
Jim,
aliens,
but Jim,
and they won't even deport criminal aliens.
no, Jim, but they ultimately pay more into the system than they take out. That's a
Oh,
fact.
immigration
That's
is
a
good for the
fact.
economy.
It's good for the economy.
Immigration as such is good.
And
But
Jim,
wait a minute here. That still doesn't justify
no,
Biden
of course
handing out
not.
cell phones,
No,
ATM cards,
no.
and
Of course not. No, it
hotel
doesn't.
rooms to
No,
legal.
but
And
no,
if a
it
person
does
commits a
not.
violent crime, I would deport them if they're not.
Sure, I would too. But
Okay,
when Trump talks about the poisoning the blood of the country, or
that
we've
is
got bad
terrible.
genes in the country,
That's
that
terrible.
so when you take all that with his character, with the things that he said and done, with what he did on January 6th, then you say to me, okay,
Up against the known racism of the Democrats.
and what I say is they're all so bad, I wouldn't give any of them my vote.
Well,
Honestly,
if, look, if I have a choice between, you know, I won't steal that one. Let me try and give a metaphorical
you were going
example.
to give mine, you could give
No, no,
mine.
no. Well, let's put it this way. Would you get behind the wheel uh, of a car when the guy was drunk, or would you get behind the wheel of a car more likely? Obviously, you wouldn't get behind the wheel of the car if you had a choice in either case. But let's say you have to get behind the wheel of one of the two. Someone's put a gun to your head. You've got to take a ride with a drunk, or you've got to take a ride with a homicidal maniac who's feeling suicidal tonight. Which one would you get in the car of?
Oh God. The problem here is in this situation, in the situation you just gave, the weight of my decision carries far more weight, right? My decision about whom to vote for carries virtually no weight. You know what I'm saying? So whom I vote for
Your
is not
endorsement, your
my,
endorsement, your vote, and if everyone obviously, the question
right.
is, how should each and
But
every
here's why,
voter
Jim.
think,
Here's why.
and what is the
Here's why I'm saying to you that I think that Trump, I think trying to figure out which one is worse is a fool's game because you're going to end up pointing out how shitty they all are, which they are. And I
Well,
think
no,
that,
can I respond to that in a philosophical way?
sure,
I think there's a degree of rationalism that exists. You know, we've discussed this before with libertarians and foreign policy.
sure.
Their rationalism, their devotion to floating abstraction, makes them unable to see the very real differences between Iran and Israel, for example. And let me suggest that there are people who, even people who call themselves objectivists, who suffer from a similar kind of rationalism, devotion to abstraction, that blinds them from very real differences between political candidates.
Okay, I don't disagree with you.
Okay, just a
It,
thought,
but
just
the
something,
Jim,
just something
the
for all of us to
reason,
think about out
hold on,
there.
but there is no mind-bodied economy.
No,
There is no theory practice dichotomy. The
that's right.
reason you don't sanction evil is because of the consequences of doing so. And in this scenario, right?
Well, but
At
that's
some
the
point,
problem. The calling a vote a sanction, a moral
no,
sanction,
and
more than a
no.
consequential thing. It's a private ballot.
Jim,
You don't
Jim,
have to tell anyone. You can go
no,
back
but
there and
no,
vote just to vote.
but we're doing, like you said, extends to an
That's what
endorsement.
we're doing. See,
And let me just say that I'm
that's
not the person that says if you vote for somebody, you sanction everything they do. I
right.
don't think you do.
And don't
I
think we
don't
can
agree with
vote
that.
based on moral sanction. I
Well,
think that
I
if
think
we
that's
treat it,
part of the calculus.
that's the road to that rationalism I was talking about.
But here, Jim, it's more than just a moral sanction of a particular candidate. The problem here is that nothing has changed. Well, actually, it has. It just keeps getting worse and worse. I believe if more people stood up and said, "Look, I'm not voting for this crap," then maybe we can stop it. But every 4 years we say, well, the lesser of two evils, I've got to pick it. And things just get worse. And it doesn't matter whether it's a Democrat or a Republican in office, it gets worse and worse. And at some point, can we
And I
just
promise
say,
you, if Trump wins, things will in many ways get worse.
and they're going to get worse if she,
Literally, 4 years ahead.
so whatever happens, they're going to get worse. So as an individual, for me to change my life required for things to get very bad for me, right? And in some ways, it's better if things get worse quicker for people to wake up.
Hmm.
But it's
Harsh to advocate as an approach, isn't it? You'd say,
it
I want
is
to
it
suffer
is
so that they wake up.
no. I don't
Give them
want
full,
people.
in that case, it would
Wait
be
a
let's
second though. In a sense, Jim, it's
accelerate the
justice.
zeitgeist theory.
No. In a sense, it's justice because in a sense, people should suffer for their bad choices. It's justice that people suffer bad consequences when they keep making them over and over again. If people keep voting for a welfare state, which they are either candidate, don't
Yeah.
they at some point deserve to suffer the
The,
repercussions for that?
well, that's it. And they will.
Either way, they're going to.
And they will either way, therefore.
Right. And so for all of those reasons, for because I think it's very different when you take all the factors into consideration to figure out which way we're going to be worse. Because even if you can say we're going to be worse under one candidate than the other, it's not going to be so much worse. It really isn't. The country's going to survive either
I
way.
think that there is, let me put it this way. I think that the all other things being equal, America will be fully more impoverished. The government will be worse if Harris gets her way. If Trump gets his way, then if Trump gets his way, I think there's a range of other issues that are really significant that we haven't even addressed. For example, the encouragement to the most radical notions of the progressive left today, what's called woke, will be given aid and comfort like never before. And I normally do not agree with Republicans on social issues. When it comes to certain issues that the Democrats have now embraced with respect to education and so forth, take, for example, vouchers. If Trump gets in with a Republican Congress, we're likely to have a federal endorsement of private school vouchers. And that is certainly something that they've committed themselves to, Trump and the Republicans. Or you yourself admitted that the judicial nominations of Trump would likely be better and would probably buy America considerably more time for cultural change. On the other hand, if Harris gets in, what will happen to education? Well, we can say goodbye to many of our private and charter schools, and we, in fact, will probably have racial and transgender
Yeah.
education imposed.
If she got everything in the world she wanted, which she's not going to. And that's part of the thing
And now
too.
let's ask what will happen See, and I happen to think on foreign policy, it does matter. I think that Trump would probably be a bit worse on Ukraine, a whole lot better when it comes to Iran. No, he won't change the regime in Tehran, as I think we ought to have our policy to be. But on the other hand, he will contain it a lot better than Harris, who would go right back to funding Iran and letting them get away with murder. Biden right now is defending Iran's nuclear missile program for reasons that are absolutely beyond my understanding. And Harris would, I think, be even worse than Biden when it comes to Israel and Iran.
But what about Trump sucking up to dictators? That doesn't bother you?
They all would negotiate. Only
No,
Harris
no,
would
no,
do
no.
so from a.
No, 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 no. There's a difference here. There's a difference. And here's the
You're telling
difference.
me she wouldn't negotiate with all the dictators of the
I,
world, including Iran, China, Russia. Only she would do it from
I'm
the
not, Jim. I'm not
position
saying she
of
wouldn't
suppliant.
negotiate, Jim. What I'm saying is that the problem is it lies in what we talked about earlier with Trump and his narcissistic ego, is that they cater to his ego and he buys it.
And he
All they
buys.
have to, he's so happy he's Viktor Orban said, "Oh, I'm wonderful." That type of stuff, when you can get inside someone's head like that, that's dangerous. That's
That's true,
dangerous.
it's really easy to get inside the head of someone who's already on their knees, cringing and apologizing for being an American.
Listen, Jim, I agree that I'm just saying that for the what you're saying about her, there's a counter argument against Trump that they both
Oh,
suck.
yeah, I would say that it is inevitably it is dangerous to deal with dictators, but both will deal with all of them. And Trump will at least have the sense of America's advantage and the need to
Why do
boast.
you think that? Why? I don't get
Well,
that.
it's what
Because
he
he says so?
what I'm saying is no. I think he honestly wants to be loved by Americans, and I don't think they just take his word for what success is.
Jim, the people that follow Trump, and this gets back to what I said earlier, have followed him through flip after flop after flip after flop. It does not matter to them.
They are Most Americans are as unmoored in principle as Trump is. Okay,
Okay.
but the point is, they won't simply believe that it's a success because he says so.
Oh,
I
yes, they
don't think
do.
so.
Yes, they do.
I
Whenever
don't
he
think
says
so.
they believe everything, not only that, but he also now has a media behind him between Fox News, Newsmax, and the podcasters and radio hosts that
And some
defend everything
horrible
he says.
podcasters they are, between Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and
Right.
who else out there. I am repelled by them. I'm repelled by Trump's vice president. His acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention was a shameful moment in the history of the Republican Party.
And there's a very real chance he could end up president.
And that is, and see what I'm trying to, as we wind up the conversation, I'm trying to back you into what I think is maybe one of your strongest points. The guy he named as vice president is ideological in a way Trump, I don't think, is. And he's ideological in a very bad way. He says America, has been famously said since its founding, America was unified by ideas. We're not a race. We're not an ethnicity. We're unified by the ideas of Jeffersonian liberalism. And Vance says America is not an idea. People don't die for ideas, they die for their families. We're a people, and I've been 7 generations of Appalachia in the same graveyard. Okay, that is collectivism, and it is not just non-ideological, it is anti-ideological. And that troubles me in a far more disturbing way. A lot of people, when the reason why I didn't vote for Trump in 2016, before we had any experience with Donald Trump as president, is that I thought that compared to the other candidates, he was ideologically something alien. And to some extent, it proved I was right. I proved myself right. There's something alien to him. If that's the case, and let me put it this way, in the course of the last 4 years of it, or the next 4 years of his presidency, suggested to me that he's less ideologically committed than I had ever thought he was. In fact, less intellectual than I ever thought he was. Someone like J.D. Vance, he actually strikes me as smart, ideological,
Yes.
consistent, and he would be. It's not a question of wetting his finger and putting it to the political wind and what would make me popular with most of my base, because I really think that's how Trump gauges most things, is emotionally based on the popular feelings of his base. I think they control him. Gail Wynand is a great example, and from the Fountainhead, someone says, I control them. And Trump likes to say, I do control them. The name of Gail Winans' yacht. I do. I do control these people. I could walk down Fifth Avenue and show, you are their slave. A leash is a rope with a noose at both ends, Mr. Trump. And you are as much the slave of these popular passions as you are its director. With someone like Vance, I think he's taking the lead. He's out there actually being the, the drum major leading the marching band down the street when it comes to a bad ideology, a very dangerous anti-American ideology.
Okay, so Jim, well said. I still wouldn't vote for Trump, and I think it's important that we say before.
I made the case that you asked me to
No,
try
you
and
did a great. I was gonna listen.
Trump.
Compliments from the chef. I'm not a chef, but whatever. But or to the chef, to the chef. You served up a great argument. I just want people to know that you have not you
I wish
committed
I could take credit for all of it. I've
to.
been engaged in recent weeks in conversations with the great Leonard Peikoff himself about this. And let me put it this way. I have presented to you some of the challenges that he has presented to me on the question and why he was sticking with his vote for Donald Trump, which he did make in 2016, much to many people, to great controversy. Let's put it that way. But in trying to explain that to me and why he intends again to vote for Donald Trump is where I got a lot of what I said here. Not all of it. And I don't want to. Dr. Peikoff's position is different and more elaborate than what I've laid out here. But the point is, I did get much of it from those conversations. So I wish I could
Awesome,
take the credit for my.
awesome. Well, okay, Jim, where can they find you?
Well, whew, let's see. I do regular podcasts for you, here at the Rational Egoist, for the Ayn Rand Center, United Kingdom. Every week I do multiple podcasts. I lead discussion groups at the Ayn Rand Center UK. If you're a paid subscriber, I can also be found just about every day on Facebook at places like the Ayn Rand page or the Leonard Peikoff Study and Appreciation page, where I am an admin and I answer questions almost every day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. For now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. Until next time.